Welcome back. After a back and forth over securing a ballistic expert and getting him to test the firearm and the bullets in the case, he has finally given him his expert opinion and findings on these exhibits. His findings were put to the state's ballistic expert, Christopher Mangena. Christopher Mangena is adamant that no two firearms can leave the same individual markings on a firearm. These are the markings, he says, prove a match with the bullet found at the crime scene.
My understanding, you talk about striations, grooves, lens, etc. Is a firearm in the world which has, are there two firearms or more which have the similar striations or grooves inside the barrel?
Inside the barrel?
Yeah.
No, my lord.
Never, never, ever.
Unless if we have to check all the firearms in the world, but the ones that we have ever checked, no.
In a demonstration that had the court glued to the screen, the lawyer for accused number 2, Sipho Ramusipile, asked Mangena to show him these individual marks that he says he found in the test bullet that matched the bullet found at the crime scene. Mangena identified at least 7 of the markings, which are referred to as striations, and said they prove that this is a match. But the ballistics experts of the defense disagrees on this aspect of striations.
Having consulted with our expert, and he will come and tell this court that what you purported to be matches, be it the 6, the 5, and the 2, are not matches, because the application of CMS says the matching must be consecutive, that there should not be a break.
There should not be a break.
Yes, when you count the striations.
No, that's not how it works. The consecutive matching stripe, you have your consecutive matching stripe. As long as your matching stripes are in one group and they are matching, there can be a break as long as your break is exactly the same on both sides.
The big question here is whether this is the same bullet or not, and that is where the two experts seem to lock horns. Mangena is adamant that there are enough markings to make for a positive match, while the defense's expert says they are there but not enough to make for a positive match. He says his findings are that the results are inconclusive.
He says the following: the class characteristics are the same. Right?
How many of those striations?
We are not talking about the striations, man. I'm talking about the class.
Yeah, okay, fine. All of them.
Between the exhibit bullet,
yeah, we've got 2.
and the test bullet.
We've got the test and the exhibit, fine.
Yes. Yeah. So the class characteristics are the same.
On both
the test and the exhibit
fine,
bullet,
fine.
my lord. But when we come to the individual characteristics, because in order to have a match, we must have class characteristics and individual characteristics that are sufficient to say that there is a match, correct?
That's correct, man.
So they constituted a match, those characteristics. Are you saying that, sir?
To me, yes, my lord, they constituted a match.
They constituted a match.
That's correct, my lord.
The defense's expert, through the lawyer for accused number 2, argues that the markings that they found do not meet the threshold required to make a positive match.
For example, in our expert's conclusion, he says this: he sees discernible matching class characteristics. He doesn't say he doesn't see any. And he says further, I also see individual characteristics, but they are not of the threshold that is required for me to conclude that there is sufficient agreement. Therefore, I'm going to come to a conclusion that is inconclusive.
As long as you say, my lord, there is sufficient, there is agreement.
Yes.
When you say there is agreement,
yes,
you can see the similarities.
Yes.
If they are not sufficient for you, they are not sufficient for you.
Yes.
But now, for me, if I'm saying I see this, the individual characteristics, which indicates to me that this is positive, I'll make it positive.
The defense is adamant that the results are subjective. The court inquired what the subjectivity would be based on, and Mangena said it's on experience. Mangena has 30 years of experience in the SAPS, 29 of which were spent in ballistics. But it's not yet known what the defense's ballistic expert's experience is, as he has not yet taken the stand. Mangena says he has also had his findings reviewed by 4 of his colleagues, but only one submitted a statement.
Now, Colonel, last afternoon when we adjourned, I asked you a question and we went on some explanation, but I think the answer was lost in translation. I asked you whether in your office have you given your findings to, or your examination and comparison to a peer reviewer who differed with your opinion?
My Lord, as I've answered yesterday, I said I gave it to 4 of my colleagues and all of them agreed to my findings.
Yeah, Colonel, but what I'm asking you, I'm not speaking specifically about this case. I'm saying in your experience, the 29 years or so as a ballistic expert, that now as a senior specialist in that office, have you given your work in another case, not this case in particular, where you, for example, your finding was one of inclusion, that is a match, and then you gave to somebody who peer reviewed and said it's an elimination or it's inconclusive. Has that happened?
My Lord, as I can recall, there's no case that I did where we differed. Where in some instances where there's differences, where maybe I made it positive and somebody said, but I'll make it inconclusive. But not where I made it positive and somebody made it negative. It has never happened with me.
Ramasipele also touched on the uniqueness of the markings created by the gun. He says they also conducted tests on a separate gun and bullet to show that another gun could show a match. The test results were beamed in court, with the part that the defense says matches circled between the test bullet and the bullet found in the crime scene.
So the purpose was to show the reproducibility of this, to show that the so-called match can be produced by a different firearm. And that exercise was performed in the presence of
Yes,
the
let's
Colonel.
hear your answer.
No, my Lord, when you look at it, it's only where at the base where it started. But the minute you start moving it towards the front, there's a complete different markings on those ones. So where they start, they can match. It's not that it's only this one. You can do it with many other bullets, where you can force it to match where you started. But the minute you start moving it towards the center, you see a complete different.
Mangena said he fired 8 bullets to determine whether this was the same firearm that was recovered from accused number 3 Mthobisi Mncube. Last year, Mangena testified that while he was conducting tests, he went to the Cleveland police station to get the firearm so that he could test the bullets on the gun that allegedly fired in the Khumalo home. He told the court that he found it in an open seal bag, and this was because it was due for destruction. Mangena said the tests on the separate case that Mncube had been arrested for in February 2015 were done and its findings filed in the SAPS's records. And that is why the firearm was in line to be destroyed. He also told the court that the firearm still had the tag whose number was the same as the one on the statement by the investigator in that case. Mncube's lawyer, Advocate Charles Mnisi, asked Mangena about how sure he was, after firing from the gun, that it was the same one.
How could you then have conclusively, beyond reasonable doubt, as the pattern that the state has, beyond reasonable doubt, that indeed this was the firearm? Because the bullets that were shot by me do match those that were fired by Rulovs. In view of your testimony that says some marks were there, some marks were not there, this was there, this was there, you know that mattering explanation, beyond reasonable doubt, exclusively say.
Mncube is at the heart of this evidence. The gun in question was allegedly recovered from him in 2015, just 4 months after May was murder, when he was arrested in an unrelated case. Mangena says the barrel of the gun causes a slippage when you fire from it, and that is why he had to use 8 bullets to test.
The one out of a barrel would result into a slippage of a bullet when it is being fired.
That's correct, man.
Now that process, the slippage, would it have an effect on the transfer of the marks to the bullet?
My lord, the slippage itself could create some other markings, but you could not get the same slippage where all your bullets will slip the same way and will pick up the same markings. The slippage you could see, but the markings on your slippage, you cannot also match them with other bullets, on the other bullets, but you can see that there was slippage.
So in other words, the slippage does also have an effect on the consistent transfer of the marks into the bullet.
That's correct, my lord.
Advocate Mnisi has requested Mangena to do a properly marked chart. This is what he will then pick up with on Monday when the proceedings resume. After the break, we get some legal analysis on this critical evidence. Stay tuned.